Caleb sat on the edge of the quiet terminal, his legs swinging as he waited. The private jet hangars were silent except for the occasional hum of distant engines. A sketchbook rested on his knees, its pages filled with airplanes drawn in careful pencil lines. He loved airports not because of the travel or the noise, but because airplanes felt alive to him. They had wings, they had strength, they could take you anywhere in the world. Today was supposed to be simple. His father, Mr. Bennett, had brought him along to the regional airfield for a meeting. "Just wait here, son," his father had said with a reassuring smile. "I'll be right back. Don't go wandering too far." Caleb nodded, happy to sit near the big glass windows where he could watch every plane that rolled by. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and metal. The sun glared off the silver wings of a parked jet, making Caleb squint as he shaded his eyes. He flipped to a new page in his sketchbook and began drawing the long, sleek nose of an executive plane. His pencil moved quickly, he was good at this. But not everyone nearby saw what Caleb saw. A pilot named Mr. Dalton, wearing a crisp uniform and dark glasses, walked across the tarmac toward the terminal. He was tired from a long morning flight and wanted only to finish his paperwork and head home. When his eyes fell on Caleb, sitting alone near the restricted gate, something in him tightened. The boy looked out of place. Dalton frowned. Who lets a kid sit around a private airfield by himself? He scanned the area but saw no parent nearby. He assumed trouble. Caleb, still deep in his sketch, didn't notice Dalton approaching. He was shading the jet's tail when a shadow fell over him. "Hey," Dalton said sharply. "What are you doing here?" Caleb looked up, startled. "Just drawing airplanes, sir." "This is a private terminal," Dalton said. "You can't just hang around here." "Where are your parents?" "My dad's in a meeting," Caleb said quickly. "He works here sometimes. He said I could wait." Dalton's brow furrowed. He didn't recognize the boy. "What's your dad's name?" "Mr. Bennett," Caleb replied, a little nervous now. Dalton didn't know the name. To him, that was enough reason to worry. Children didn't usually wait around private jets unless they belonged to someone important. Dalton convinced himself something wasn't right. "I'm going to have to check this out," Dalton muttered. He walked off briskly toward the security office. Caleb watched him go, confused, but went back to his drawing. A few minutes later, two uniformed security officers entered the lounge with Dalton trailing behind. One officer, a tall man with a radio on his belt, walked straight up to Caleb. "Son, can we see some ID?" the officer asked. "I'm 12, Caleb said quietly, clutching his sketchbook. "I don't have ID." "Where's your dad again?" the other officer asked. "He's inside," Caleb repeated. His voice trembled a little now. "He's at a meeting. He said I could sit here." Dalton folded his arms. "I found him sitting alone by the gate. Could be trespassing. Could be something else." The officers exchanged looks. They didn't see any harm in the boy, but a call was a call they had to check. One of them spoke into his radio, asking dispatch to verify if anyone named Bennett had signed in for a meeting. Caleb sat frozen in his seat, unsure why this was happening. Other pilots passing by glanced at the scene. Some looked puzzled, others concerned. The sight of a child being questioned by police was unusual and uncomfortable. Caleb felt every eye on him. Minutes stretched longer than they should have. Caleb shifted in his seat, wishing his father would hurry. "Sir, I'm not doing anything wrong," Caleb said softly. "I'm just drawing." He held up his sketchbook as proof, showing pages full of airplanes. Dalton didn't even glance at it. "Rules are rules," he said stiffly. "Kids don't belong here unless supervised." "I am supervised," Caleb whispered. "My dad's coming back soon." The taller officer sighed, sensing the boy's fear. Let's just wait and see if his story checks out, he said. But Caleb already felt small and unwanted. He didn't know why this man didn't believe him. He didn't know why sitting quietly with a pencil could look like trouble to someone else. Outside, the sun shifted behind a cloud, casting a gray shadow across the runway. The sound of an approaching car broke the heavy silence. Mr. Bennett had returned from his meeting. He stepped out of his sedan, spotted the police near his son, and quickened his pace, confusion turning to alarm. "Caleb," he called. "What's going on here?" The officers straightened at once. Caleb jumped to his feet, relief washing over his face. "Sir, is this your son?" the tall officer asked. "Yes," Mr. Bennett said firmly. "What exactly is happening?" Dalton stepped forward, trying to sound official. "I found this boy sitting alone near the terminal. I didn't recognize him, so I called security. Could be a safety risk." Mr. Bennett's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed calm. "A safety risk?" He was sketching airplanes. "I told him to wait right here while I attended a meeting." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. This was clearly not what they expected. Caleb held tight to his sketchbook, standing close to his father now. His face was pale. He'd done nothing wrong, yet people treated him as if he had. And in that moment, the tension in the air thickened, not just because a father had found his son being questioned, but because Dalton had no idea who he was speaking to. The security lounge fell silent for a moment after Mr. Bennett's firm words. Caleb stayed close to his father's side, clutching his sketchbook as if it could shield him from the uncomfortable stares. "Sir, we were just verifying," said the tall officer carefully. "The pilot here said the boy seemed unsupervised." Mr. Bennett looked directly at Mr. Dalton. His gaze was steady, not angry yet, but sharp enough to make Dalton shift his weight uneasily. "You called police on a 12-year-old for sketching airplanes." Dalton straightened his uniform. "I didn't know who he was." "A child sitting around a private jet terminal? That's unusual." "It's unusual," Mr. Bennett replied evenly, "but not illegal. And it certainly doesn't call for treating him like a suspect." Caleb lowered his eyes, wishing the floor would swallow him up. People passing through the lounge kept sneaking glances. The whole situation felt wrong. He had only been sitting quietly, drawing the thing he loved most, and now grown men in uniforms looked at him as if he were dangerous. "Dad, I told them you were inside," Caleb whispered. "I know, son," Mr. Bennett said gently. He placed a protective hand on Caleb's shoulder and turned back to the officers. "Are we done here?" The taller officer cleared his throat. "If you can confirm your identity, sir, then yes." Mr. Bennett pulled out his badge. "Federal Aviation Administration," he said calmly. "Regional Administrator. My office oversees this airport." Dalton froze. The badge gleamed in the sunlight coming through the wide terminal windows. The officers blinked, immediately recognizing what it meant. Mr. Bennett wasn't just any visitor. He was a senior official in charge of the very rules they enforced. The taller officer stepped back at once. "Sir, we're very sorry." "We didn't mean." Mr. Bennett raised a hand to stop him. "You were doing your job," he said evenly. Then he turned his attention to Dalton. "But calling police on a child without even asking for a parent first? That's not doing your job. That's making assumptions." Dalton opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face burned red under the brim of his cap. "I thought," he started, then faltered. "I thought maybe you thought wrong," Mr. Bennett said. His voice was still calm, but every syllable carried weight. "You saw a boy who didn't look like he belonged here, and you jumped to conclusions. That's dangerous for him, and for you." The shorter officer shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, no harm was done," he tried to say, but Caleb spoke up in a soft, trembling voice. "There was harm, Caleb said. Everyone turned to look at him. You scared me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. You made me feel like I didn't belong here. The words landed like a stone thrown into still water. The lounge went quiet again. Dalton glanced away, unable to meet the boy's eyes. Mr. Bennett took a deep breath. Son, go wait in the car for me. I'll be right there. Caleb hesitated. Am I in trouble? Not at all, his father assured him. You've done nothing wrong. Caleb walked slowly toward the door, holding his sketchbook tightly against his chest. His small figure disappeared outside, leaving the three men standing in uncomfortable silence. Mr. Bennett turned back to the officers. Please make a note of this incident, he said. I want it on record that my son was questioned without cause. The taller officer nodded quickly. Yes, sir. We'll file a report right away. As Mr. Bennett headed for the exit, Dalton hurried after him. Sir, wait, he said, his voice low and tense. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I was just concerned about security. Mr. Bennett stopped and looked at him. You were concerned, he said, but not about security. You were concerned because you didn't recognize my son. You assumed he didn't belong. That's not security, that's bias. Dalton swallowed hard. I wasn't thinking about it like that. That's the problem, Mr. Bennett replied. You weren't thinking at all. He didn't raise his voice, but Dalton felt each word cut through his pride. Other pilots nearby pretended not to listen, though their ears were clearly tuned to every syllable. Sir, Dalton said again, his tone softer now, I really am sorry. I just wanted to protect the area. Then learn how to do it without humiliating children, Mr. Bennett said, and walked away. Outside, Caleb sat quietly in the car, staring at his sketchbook but not drawing. His father opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. Are you okay, son? He asked gently. Caleb nodded, but his voice cracked. Why didn't he believe me? I told him you were coming. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Mr. Bennett sighed and reached over to squeeze his shoulder. Sometimes people see what they expect to see instead of what's really there, he said. It's not fair, but it happens. You didn't deserve it. Caleb blinked hard, holding back tears. I just wanted to draw airplanes. And you will, his father promised. Don't let one person's bad judgment stop you from loving what you love. They sat in silence for a moment. In the distance, a private jet roared to life, rolling down the runway and lifting into the bright sky. Inside the terminal, Dalton stood alone, watching the car pull away. For the first time, he felt a twist of regret deeper than just embarrassment. This wasn't only about almost angering a federal administrator. It was about a boy's frightened eyes, a boy who loved airplanes, and how Dalton had made him feel unwelcome. He told himself it was just a misunderstanding, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. The car ride home was quiet. Caleb pressed his forehead against the window, watching the clouds drift lazily in the afternoon sky. He didn't say much, but his father could feel the weight of what had happened. Mr. Bennett gripped the steering wheel firmly. He was not angry in the way people expected, no raised voice, no harsh words, but his calmness carried something stronger, disappointment. He had spent his whole career teaching people about safety, responsibility, and respect. Seeing his own son treated unfairly in a place he oversaw cut deeper than he expected. At the same time, Dalton remained behind at the airport, pacing in the pilot lounge. The words "you weren't thinking at all" kept echoing in his mind. He replayed the moment Caleb held up his sketchbook, hoping someone would just look at his drawings. Dalton had brushed it aside without even glancing. Now, he wished he had stopped for just 1 second to see the planes carefully sketched in pencil, the work of a child who loved aviation, not someone causing trouble. A few hours later, the incident report reached airport management. It was brief but clear. Minor questioned at terminal gate. No violation. Parent present, verified identity. Complaint noted by FAA Regional Administrator. The operations manager, a woman named Miss Rivera, called Dalton into her office. She kept her voice even, but her expression was serious. "Dalton," she said, "I've just read the report from security. Care to explain why you called police on a 12-year-old boy?" Dalton stood stiffly. He was alone. "I thought it was a risk." "You didn't ask questions before calling in," she asked. "I did," Dalton said. "He said his dad was in a meeting, but I didn't believe him." "Why not?" Dalton hesitated. He didn't have a good answer. He tried to find the right words, but every explanation sounded weak in his head. "Look," Miss Rivera said, leaning back in her chair. "We all have to take security seriously. But that means using good judgment, not just jumping to conclusions. This boy's father is your FAA administrator. He has authority over every runway you land on. And more importantly," she added, her voice softening, "he's a parent. How would you feel if someone treated your kid that way?" Dalton swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to upset anyone." "I'm sure you didn't," Miss Rivera said. "But you did. And now you've got to fix it." Meanwhile, at home, Caleb sat at the kitchen table flipping through his sketchbook. The joy of drawing planes had dimmed. Each page reminded him of sitting in that terminal, feeling small under suspicious eyes. Mr. Bennett watched his son quietly for a while, then spoke. "Caleb, do you remember what I always say about aviation?" Caleb looked up. "That it's about trust." "Exactly," his father said. "Every pilot, every controller, every mechanic has to trust one another. Without trust, no one gets off the ground safely. Today, that pilot didn't trust you. He judged you before he knew you. But that doesn't mean you stop trusting yourself or stop loving airplanes." Caleb nodded slowly. "It just felt like I wasn't supposed to be there." "You belong anywhere you have a right to be," Mr. Bennett said firmly. "Airports are for everyone. And I'm going to make sure the people who work there remember that." The next morning, Mr. Bennett returned to the airport for another meeting. Word of the incident had already spread among staff. Some whispered about it in break rooms, shaking their heads. Others avoided talking about it out loud, but everyone knew Dalton was in trouble. As Mr. Bennett stepped into the terminal, Dalton spotted him from across the hall. For a moment, Dalton considered walking the other way. But Miss Rivera's voice rang in his ears, "You've got to fix it." He walked over, hat in hand, his usual confidence replaced by something quieter. "Mr. Bennett," Dalton said, clearing his throat. "Could I have a moment?" Mr. Bennett stopped and turned. His expression was calm but unreadable. "Yes. I wanted to apologize," Dalton said. "I made a bad call yesterday. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't. I should have listened to your son instead of assuming the worst." Mr. Bennett studied him for a long moment. "Why did you assume the worst?" he asked. Dalton shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. I guess I just didn't think a kid should be sitting there alone." "That's not what I asked," Mr. Bennett said evenly. Dalton looked down at his shoes. He couldn't bring himself to say the real reason, not because it was ugly, but because admitting it out loud would mean facing it fully. "I've been flying for 20 years, Dalton said finally. "I'm trained to watch for anything unusual. But yesterday I let my training turn into suspicion instead of awareness. I'm sorry." Mr. Bennett nodded slightly. "Suspicion without reason isn't security. It's fear. And fear has no place in aviation." Dalton exhaled slowly. "I understand." Mr. Bennett's gaze softened a little. "Do you have kids, Dalton?" "Yes." A daughter. She's 9. Then imagine someone calling the police on her for sitting in an airport with a sketchbook, Mr. Bennett said quietly. How would you explain that to her? Dalton closed his eyes briefly. I couldn't. I wouldn't want her to go through that. Then don't put someone else's child through it, Mr. Bennett said. Dalton nodded, the weight of his mistake settling deeper. Is there any way I can make this right? Talk to my son, Mr. Bennett said. Not to clear your name, not to save your job, do it so he knows adults can admit when they're wrong. By afternoon, Caleb was back at the airport with his father. Dalton met them near the gate, holding something behind his back. Hi, Caleb, Dalton said carefully. I owe you an apology. Caleb looked uncertain but didn't step away. Okay. I didn't listen to you yesterday, Dalton admitted. I judged you when I should have just asked a few questions. That was wrong. I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't belong here. Caleb glanced at his father, who gave a small nod. Dalton brought out what he'd been hiding, a model airplane, polished silver and neatly detailed. I thought you might like this, he said. It's a model of the jet I fly. Maybe you can add it to your drawings. Caleb's eyes widened. He took the model carefully, a small smile forming despite everything. Thanks, he said quietly. For Dalton, the boy's shy smile hurt more than Mr. Bennett's stern words. Because it showed how simple kindness could have been from the start. The next day, the airport seemed quieter than usual, though the same planes came and went, their engines roaring over the tarmac. Whispers had spread among staff and pilots. Everyone knew about the incident with Caleb, and everyone knew who his father really was. In an upstairs office overlooking the runway, Mr. Bennett met with Miss Rivera, the airport's operations manager. Papers were spread across the desk, a copy of the security report, an incident form signed by the officers, and notes about the complaint. Thank you for meeting on short notice, Miss Rivera said. She looked uneasy. I want to make sure this doesn't happen again. What happened to your son was unfair. Mr. Bennett nodded. His voice was calm but firm. It's not just about my son. It's about how your staff treat any visitor here. If Caleb had been anyone else's child, would anyone have believed him? Miss Rivera looked down. Probably not, she admitted. Dalton acted too fast. He knows it. He's already apologized. An apology is a start, Mr. Bennett said. But airports are about precision. If a pilot makes a poor judgment in the air, there are consequences. Why should it be different on the ground? Miss Rivera sighed. I understand. Are you going to file an official complaint with the FAA? Mr. Bennett didn't answer right away. He looked out the window where a private jet rolled slowly toward the runway. For now, I'm focused on making this a learning moment. But the record will show what happened. Meanwhile, Dalton sat alone in the pilot lounge, staring at the coffee in his paper cup. He had flown hundreds of passengers across thousands of miles, but today he felt grounded in more ways than one. He couldn't shake the image of Caleb clutching his sketchbook, eyes full of fear and confusion. Another pilot sat down across from him. Rough week, the man asked casually. Dalton forced a smile. You could say that. I heard about the kid, the other pilot said carefully. Look, we all make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up too much. Dalton didn't answer. His mistake wasn't just a slip in procedure, it was a failure of judgment. And knowing that Caleb's father was an FAA administrator only made it worse. He could feel the weight of every whisper around the terminal. That afternoon, Mr. Bennett brought Caleb back to the airport not because he wanted to, but because his meeting with management had run long and he didn't want to leave his son at home alone. Caleb walked close to his father, still unsure about being back in the same place where he'd been treated so poorly. Are you sure I should come? Caleb asked quietly. Yes, his father said. You have nothing to hide. You belong here as much as anyone. When they entered the terminal, several staff members nodded politely. Dalton, standing near the counter, froze when he saw them. Mr. Bennett, Dalton said, approaching carefully. Caleb. Caleb looked down at the floor. He still remembered the sound of police radios and the way people stared. Dalton cleared his throat. I spoke with Miss Rivera this morning. I know what I did was wrong. And I know you've already heard my apology, but I wanted to say it again directly. Mr. Bennett crossed his arms. Words are easy. Change is harder. Dalton swallowed. I understand. Caleb glanced up at the pilot. Why didn't you just ask me to wait instead of calling the police? He asked softly. The simple question made Dalton's face tighten. I don't have a good answer, he admitted. I let my fear get ahead of my thinking. And I'm sorry for that. Caleb nodded slightly but stayed close to his father. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the runway, Mr. Bennett received a phone call from the FAA regional office in another city. They had heard about the incident through the internal report. Do you want us to open an investigation into the pilot? The voice on the other end asked. Mr. Bennett hesitated. He didn't want revenge. He wanted respect for his son and for every visitor who might walk through that terminal. Not an investigation, Mr. Bennett said finally. But I want mandatory training on judgment and sensitivity for all staff at this airport. Pilots included. That can be arranged, the voice replied. When he hung up, Caleb was sitting at the kitchen table again, sketching the model jet Dalton had given him. Dad? Caleb asked without looking up. Is that pilot going to get fired? No, Mr. Bennett said. I'm not trying to ruin his life. I just want him to learn something. I want everyone here to learn something. Caleb frowned thoughtfully. I guess that's better. It is, his father agreed. Because if people change, that helps more than punishment. The next morning, an email went out to every employee at the airport, mandatory meeting for all staff, FAA guidance on proper protocol and respectful conduct. Attendance required. When Dalton saw it, his stomach dropped. He knew it was because of him. Pilots talked in low voices, wondering what had triggered such an order. By noon, the meeting room was full. Mr. Bennett stood at the front, not in anger, but with authority. Caleb sat quietly in the back, sketching as his father spoke. This airport is a place of safety and precision, Mr. Bennett began. But safety isn't just about engines and runways. It's about people. Yesterday, my son was treated like a threat when all he did was sit with a pencil and paper. That should never happen to anyone. Dalton shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We cannot afford to make decisions based on fear or quick judgment, Mr. Bennett continued. Pilots know better than anyone what happens when assumptions replace facts. In the air, assumptions kill. On the ground, they harm people in quieter ways, but harm is harm. Caleb looked up from his sketchbook and saw several staff members nodding. Even Dalton nodded, feeling the truth in every word. This is not about one man or one mistake, Mr. Bennett said. It's about building a culture where everyone, passengers, workers, visitors, children, feels they belong. That starts today. The room stayed silent, heavy with understanding. Marcus stepped into the bright corridor of the regional airport, his polished shoes tapping softly on the tiled floor. The place smelled of coffee and jet fuel. News had spread fast. The father of the boy falsely accused by the pilot was none other than Marcus Bennett, a high-ranking FAA administrator. Marcus wasn't here to make a scene. He was here for his son. At the far end of the hall, young Jamal sat quietly on a bench, his legs swinging. He looked calm now, but Marcus noticed the small way his son clutched the edge of his backpack tight, as if afraid someone might try to take it again. "Dad." Jamal jumped up, relief flashing across his face. Marcus knelt down and hugged him tightly. "You okay, son?" "Yeah," Jamal whispered. "They thought I was doing something bad." "I didn't." Marcus smiled gently, brushing Jamal's shoulder. "I know. You don't ever have to explain to me." A police officer, the same one who'd been called earlier, walked toward them with an awkward look. "Mr. Bennett." "I didn't know." Marcus stood up straight, his voice calm but firm. "You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat a child with respect." Behind them, the pilot who had made the call lingered near the security desk. His uniform looked crisp, but his expression was anything but confident. He expected Marcus to shout, to threaten, maybe to demand his job. Instead, Marcus simply took Jamal by the hand and turned to the officer. "Is there a quiet room where we can talk?" Marcus asked. The officer nodded quickly, almost too eager to please. They were led to a small conference room with glass walls overlooking the runway. Planes rolled by slowly outside, sunlight bouncing off their silver bodies. Jamal stared out at them, his love for flying unshaken. Inside, Marcus spoke clearly. "My son is not a suspect. He is a child who loves airplanes. You treated him like a threat without even asking a question." His eyes shifted to the pilot now standing in the doorway. "Why?" The pilot swallowed. He was near the restricted gate. "I just wanted to make sure everything was safe." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Safe for whom? Did you even talk to him before calling the police?" The pilot hesitated, clearly ashamed. "No. I didn't." Jamal finally spoke up, his small voice steady. "I just wanted to watch the planes take off. I wasn't touching anything. I didn't even go past the line." Marcus nodded at his son, then looked back at the pilot. Children should never be made to feel like criminals for being curious. Especially not in places meant to inspire them. The room went silent for a long moment. The pilot shifted on his feet, regret written all over his face. "I'm sorry, Jamal," he said, looking directly at the boy. "I should have spoken to you first. I was wrong." Jamal gave a shy nod, not fully knowing how to respond. Marcus softened his voice, though it carried even more weight now. "I'm not here to destroy anyone's career. I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen again to my son or anyone else's." The officer scribbled notes nervously, clearly aware that this meeting would have consequences. After they left the room, Marcus guided Jamal toward the observation deck. They stood side by side, watching a plane rise into the bright sky. Jamal's eyes lit up the way they always did when engines roared and metal birds climbed into the clouds. "Still want to be a pilot?" Marcus asked with a smile. "Yeah," Jamal said quickly. "I'm not scared. I just don't want people to think I'm bad because I'm curious." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Curiosity is how you learn. One day, you'll fly these planes yourself. And you'll do it better than anyone who ever doubted you." As they turned to leave, reporters had already begun to gather outside, cameras flashing. Word was out about who Marcus was and what had happened. But Marcus wasn't thinking about headlines. He was thinking about how to turn this moment into something good, not just for Jamal, but for every child who loved to dream big. Later that evening, Marcus received a call from the airline's regional director. The pilot had reported the incident himself, admitting fault. "Mr. Bennett," the director said, voice careful, "we deeply regret what happened. We'd like to meet with you to discuss better training for our staff. We want to make sure this never happens again." Marcus agreed, on one condition. "My son comes too," he said. "He deserves to see that his voice matters." The next morning, Jamal woke up to find his dad ironing a shirt and humming softly. "Big day." Jamal asked. Marcus smiled. Yes. We're going to help some grown ups learn what you already know, that people should be seen for who they are, not what someone assumes. Jamal grinned, feeling taller somehow, like his small voice had made a big difference. And somewhere in the distance, a plane cut through the clouds, carrying with it the sound of change on the wind. Marcus woke early that morning, his heart heavy but steady. He had spent the night thinking about everything: the pilot's call, the police, the shocked look on his son's face, and the way the story had spread like wildfire. He was not just a father now, he was also the FAA administrator who had a responsibility to the public. Devin sat at the kitchen table, quiet, pushing his cereal around. Marcus walked over and put a hand on his son's shoulder. Big day today, Marcus said softly. Are you gonna talk about it? Devin asked. His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. Yes, Marcus replied. But not just for me. For you, too. People need to hear what really happened. And why it matters. By mid-morning, the conference room at the airport was full of reporters, officials, and curious onlookers. Cameras lined the back wall. Marcus, wearing his navy suit and polished shoes, stepped up to the podium. Devin sat in the front row, next to his mother, who held his hand tight. Good morning, Marcus began, his voice calm but firm. Many of you have heard about the incident last week involving my son and a pilot's call to the police. I'm here to talk about what happened and why we must do better. He paused, scanning the room. The pilot, Captain Reynolds, sat stiffly in a chair near the aisle. His face was pale. He didn't expect Marcus to speak so directly. My son Devin is 12, Marcus continued. He loves airplanes. He spends his free time reading flight manuals and drawing jets. He was standing near a gate, quietly watching planes take off. He did nothing wrong. But he was treated like a threat. The room went silent. Camera shutters clicked softly. Marcus spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. This is not about anger. This is about understanding. If a child can't watch planes without fear, we've lost something important, not just in aviation, but in our humanity. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. A few reporters glanced his way. Marcus looked straight at the cameras. I've spoken to Captain Reynolds. I believe he truly thought he was protecting people. But we must learn the difference between caution and assumption. We must learn to look at people, especially children, as human beings first. His voice grew stronger now. I'm not just Devin's father. I'm responsible for making sure our aviation system works for everyone. And that means making sure fear doesn't control our judgment. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Allen, do you want the pilot fired? Marcus shook his head. No. This is not about punishment. It's about progress. We need better training, better conversations, and better hearts. I want to work with Captain Reynolds, not against him. The statement shocked everyone. Devin looked up at his dad in surprise. Even Reynolds blinked, as though unsure he'd heard correctly. When the press conference ended, Marcus walked directly to Reynolds. I meant what I said, Marcus told him. I want us to meet. Not in front of cameras. Just you, me, and Devin. We need to talk. Reynolds hesitated, guilt all over his face. I didn't realize who you were. I didn't think that's the problem, Marcus said gently. You didn't think. Let's fix that together. Later that afternoon, they met in a quiet lounge near the terminal. Devin sat between his parents, nervous but curious. Reynolds sat across from them, looking older than his years. Devin, Marcus said, this is Captain Reynolds. He wants to tell you something. Reynolds cleared his throat. His voice cracked. Son. I'm sorry. I thought I was keeping people safe. But I see now I hurt you. That was wrong. Devin studied his face, unsure how to respond. You called the police, just because I was standing there. I know, Reynolds admitted. And I was wrong. I didn't see you. I saw danger that wasn't there. I let fear take over. Marcus leaned forward. This is why we're meeting. So that people learn. So this doesn't happen again to any kid. Reynolds nodded slowly. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll talk to other pilots. I'll admit my mistake. I don't want this on my conscience. Devin looked at his father. Can I say something? Of course, Marcus said. Devin turned to Reynolds. I just wanted to see the planes. I want to be a pilot one day. Reynolds blinked, stunned. You do? Yes, Devin said simply. I love planes. I love how they sound when they take off. Something shifted in the room. The tension softened. Reynolds saw not a threat, not even a symbol of controversy, but a kid with a dream that looked a lot like his own at 12 years old. Reynolds extended his hand. If you're serious about being a pilot, I'll help you. I'll teach you everything I know. You deserve that much and more. Devin hesitated, then shook his hand. Marcus watched them, pride swelling in his chest. Outside the lounge, reporters were still gathered, waiting for quotes, waiting for anger. But inside, something better had taken place, not a headline, but a human moment. For the first time since the incident, Devin smiled. Do you really think I can fly one day? Reynolds grinned weakly. Kid, with your dad running the FAA, I'd say the sky's already clear for you. But even if he wasn't, I'd still bet on you. Marcus chuckled. That's the right answer. As they left the lounge, Marcus put an arm around his son. The hardest part was still ahead. There would be investigations, meetings, policy changes to push through, but in that moment, he knew something powerful. A mistake had turned into an opportunity to teach. And more importantly, his son had seen that even when people fail, they can choose to rise higher. The morning sun shone brightly over Brightview High. The hallways were filled with excited chatter. Students whispered about the upcoming inter-school academic contest. For weeks, the news had spread. The quiet girl from Class 10B, Mina, was representing her school. Everyone wondered if she could handle the pressure of competing against the smartest students in the city. Mina walked into the classroom calmly, her notebook in hand. She had prepared silently, day and night, solving problem after problem. Her heart beat steadily. She was nervous, yes, but not afraid. She had worked for this moment, not for attention, but to prove that intelligence and quiet strength should never be underestimated. Miss Rena stood by the doorway, arms crossed, her face tight with tension. She had spent weeks doubting Mina, underestimating her abilities, and even mocking her in front of the class. But now, seeing Mina ready for the challenge, a strange feeling stirred inside her, worry mixed with respect. When the students from other schools began arriving, the hall buzzed with energy. Parents, teachers, and reporters took their seats. The principal called the contest to order. Welcome to this year's State Academic Challenge, he announced. Representing Brightview High is Mina, who has amazed us all with her calm and brilliant mind. May the best student win. The audience clapped enthusiastically. Mina gave a small nod, her soft smile barely visible. She didn't crave applause, but she felt a quiet confidence inside. The contest began with a series of rapid-fire questions. Each contestant had to press a buzzer to answer. Mina's calm mind allowed her to think clearly even under pressure. She buzzed in, answering question after question correctly. History, science, literature, she solved everything quickly, her explanations precise and easy to understand. The crowd was amazed. Students whispered to each other, "She's incredible. She's the quiet one?" I never knew she was this smart. Even teachers from other schools shook their heads in disbelief. Meanwhile, Miss Rena's pride clashed with guilt. She remembered the times she had belittled Mina in class, scolding her for being quiet, calling her lazy, or ignoring her potential. Now, she had to face the fact that her harshness had almost prevented Mina from shining. The next round was written and problem-solving. Mina's pencil moved gracefully, her mind calculating with ease. She completed every question ahead of time and double-checked her answers. Other students struggled, making small mistakes in their rush to finish. By the end of the round, the scoreboard showed Mina in the lead by a significant margin. She didn't smile broadly. She only straightened her back and prepared for the next challenge. Finally, the oral round arrived. Each student had to explain their answer clearly in front of everyone. When Mina's turn came, she stepped confidently to the microphone. The bright stage lights shone in her eyes, but she did not falter. She explained her solution to a difficult logic problem, step by step. Her voice was soft yet steady, carrying enough for everyone in the hall to hear. The judges listened closely, impressed by her clarity and calmness. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, then applause erupted. Students clapped, some stood, cheering quietly but excitedly. Even teachers nodded in respect. Miss Rena, standing at the side, felt her chest tighten. For the first time, she realized the depth of her mistake. She had tried to discourage the student, but Mina's strength had only grown stronger because of her challenges. When the final scores were announced, Mina had won. The hall erupted in cheers. She walked to the stage to receive the trophy, her expression calm, almost serene. The principal smiled proudly, shaking her hand. Miss Rena, for the first time, allowed herself to step forward without anger or pride. She looked Mina in the eyes and said quietly, "Congratulations. I was wrong about you." Mina smiled gently. "Thank you, Miss Rena. I didn't compete to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to do my best." The words hit Miss Rena hard. She had spent months trying to show power over Mina, only to learn that respect and encouragement were far stronger than fear and scolding. She felt a mix of shame and pride, knowing she needed to change. Back in the classroom the next day, the story of Mina's victory spread. Students from every grade were inspired by her quiet strength and determination. Miss Rena began noticing her students more carefully. She encouraged questions, praised effort, and guided her class with patience. She realized that teaching wasn't about showing authority, it was about helping students grow and believe in themselves. Mina, meanwhile, returned to her quiet routine. She didn't seek praise or attention. She continued learning because she loved it. But her classmates looked at her differently now, with respect and admiration. Miss Rena often thought about that day. She remembered Mina's calm smile, her clear explanations, and the courage it took to remain confident despite being underestimated. Slowly, she began to treat all her students with fairness and care, inspired by the quiet girl who had taught her the greatest lesson of all. By the end of the week, the school hall displayed a photo of Mina holding her trophy. Beneath it, the principal wrote, "True strength is not always loud. Sometimes, it is quiet, determined, and brilliant like Mina." Mina looked at the photo, not with pride, but with quiet satisfaction. She had proven herself not only to her school but also to the teacher who once doubted her. Miss Rena had learned an important truth: intelligence and courage are not measured by volume or visibility, but by focus, effort, and determination. And in that lesson, both teacher and student found a new respect for each other, one built on humility, kindness, and recognition of true talent.